Welcome everyone to our fifth episode of the Race and Redemption series here at Calvary Fellowship. I have a very exciting and special episode for you today. As you know, my name is Jalith Gary, and I'm one of the co-hosts for the Race and Redemption series, but I'm taking over. I have some very special guests with me today, whom I'll introduce just shortly, but I wanted to let you know why I chose these three particular people and why we're having this particular episode. As you know, our country is struggling with a lot of racial tensions, and I personally believe that it's the church's responsibility to lead in unity. And in order for us to do that, we need to be able to have these kinds of conversations and be fruitful with these conversations. So it's not just all talk, but also practical actions being taken. And you've heard from myself and Pastor Bill a few times, but you've not necessarily gotten to hear what a pastor's perspective is, nor have you really gotten to hear what a white pastor's perspective is as they navigate just shepherding their churches of different degrees of diversity during this time. And so I thought it would be really important for you to get an understanding of where they're also coming from and their perspective in light of all of the different topics that we've had. And so with that being said, I'd like to have Pastor Bill introduce himself.
Thank you so much, Jalith. Happy to be a guest on the Race and Redemption show today. Appreciate you stepping up as host. My name is Bill Lamori, lead pastor of Calvary Fellowship in West Hartford, Connecticut.
And Chris?
I'm Chris Goeppner, and I'm the lead pastor at Riverbank Church, and we have locations in Vermont and New Hampshire. And I've known Pastor Bill for a long time, and I met Jalith last year. We met at an event. So and our other guest, Clark, I just met you recently. So it's kind of cool getting to know new people in a new context.
Well, my name's Clark Pfaff. I'm the lead pastor at Valley Brook Community Church, and I've known Bill the longest on this group, and Jalith, I've probably known you for about 5 years. Bill, it feels like it's getting close to 20 years, and Chris and I just met last week, so I'm excited and honored to be invited to be a part of this podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So as they've mentioned, I've known each of them in varying degrees for a few. Well, actually, Chris, I met you a long time ago when you came to preach at Calvary, and I remembered you, but you wouldn't have known me, so it's okay. But I find each of these particular pastors very gifted in delivering the word and also in just tackling tough issues. And so that's why I specifically requested these people to join us. And that being said, I know that I have some background information on you just by way of knowing you, but can you give our viewers just a window into who you are and your backgrounds? And I guess we'll start with Chris.
Sure. Just a little, my backstory I'm from South Florida. That's where Bill and I kind of originated our relationship, South Florida. And interesting about South Florida is very uniquely diverse. And not just black, white, but you have a lot of, from the Americas and the world. And I grew up very, very integrated. Segregation wasn't a real part of my upbringing. The neighborhoods I lived in, the churches I attended, everything was pretty integrated, and that's kind of a snapshot of South Florida. Forward to 2010, we moved to Vermont, which is the whitest state in America, and that was an eye-opener for me because I treasured my integrated background. Most of my friends were from another ethnicity. I wasn't homogenized, and I always appreciated my friendships and the diversity of understanding different backgrounds. I mean, my wedding party, I had a diversity of folks. It's just different for me being up here. But with that said, I have always had a heart of really reconciliation between, especially in the church, and understanding our role. Like I've said this since I was very young. I was like, man, heaven's going to be awesome because there's going to be everybody from all over the world from all time. And it's sad that sometimes the church does not reflect heaven as much as we should. And so that's kind of a little bit of my background when it comes to this conversation. I have a heart for reconciliation with my brothers and sisters of different backgrounds, different colors. I just can't wait for heaven, so we might as well get a head start now.
Thank you. Clark?
Sure. I was born in 1962. I may be the oldest one on this phone call. I was raised in North Carolina, and you know, I was surrounded by racism, and very overt racism, just because of the culture of the South in the 60s and the 70s, and I rejected that overt racism as a child, and you know, took that into young adulthood and even into adulthood, and always considered that I wasn't racist. I didn't use racial slurs. I tried to treat everybody the same, and I always tried to work across all racial lines. But you know, within the past 10 years, as we began to see more and more racial incidents happen, I became aware that there was more going on that I really didn't understand as a white man. And I had a Latino friend who really became a race mentor to me. And it was through his relationship and my own experience through waking up to some of the less overt racism in my life, through books that I began to read, that I really began to realize that there was something in my life that I didn't like, and it was that not so overt racism, and I wanted to do something about it. And so I've been on that journey, and it's obviously taken on a new kind of passion and sensitivity since the murder of George Floyd.
Thank you. You brought something up that I want to come back to, but I'll let Pastor Bill go.
Thank you. Yeah, so like Chris said, my formative years were spent in South Florida, and as Chris said, very diverse area. So it's not at all uncommon for people to have friends from all different walks of life and all different, not only ethnicities, but countries. And it's just kind of like that. So that was growing up with around lots of different folks, and then moving to back to Connecticut, my home state actually. And then we started the church and watched our church grow in diversity, which was wonderful because the churches I had been a part of in South Florida were very much like that. And so I was thankful for that. And, you know, we never said, let's try to make a diverse church. We watched God begin to form that. But I was wakened to the fact that as God did that I really felt I had two responsibilities as a lead pastor of a church that is growing more diverse. Number one is to celebrate that. People need to know that we celebrate that, we welcome that when you walk in the door, we're so glad you're here, wherever you're from, whatever you look like. So we celebrate you. But number two, as a pastor, I have to steward that. And what does that look like? That means you have to figure that out from every single level. The person that walks in the door, is it reflected in leadership and diversity and navigating through difficult issues, not pretending they're not going on. And I guess for me, along the way with the journey is there would be certain pivot points. There would be incidents, as Clark had mentioned, that would happen, whether it's a shooting or some point of racial tension. And I would look and say, why am I seeing this so differently, maybe from a Black brother or somebody that is different from me? Why are we coming up like on total opposite ends? And it made me really begin to do some soul searching and say, okay, well, I want to understand and I want to press into this. And some years ago, we did a series called Race and Redemption. This is an ongoing video series now, but we did a church series on Sunday mornings. And that got me introduced and exposed to Dr. Anderson, who has been a mentor from afar and a friend. And he's come and spoke at our church and read through some of his stuff. But also that really pressed into me to begin forming deeper relationships with people different than me and begin having some difficult conversations and saying, look, I need your help, and I want to have a conversation and an ongoing conversation, and not just about these issues. Like, let's do life together, but then let's also, please, let's have some discussions about these and not just avoid it, not just be like, well, that's the stuff that doesn't come up, like religion and politics, and now, hey, racial discord. Like, no, let's talk about all of that stuff and let's bring it out on the table with a group of people. So that's kind of been my journey. And as Clark said, with the murder of George Floyd, that's re-elevated things and created tension to a great degree in our country, but I think a great opportunity for the body of Christ in church to speak into that in a redemptive way. And so that's part of my heart and what all this has been flowing from.
Thank you. You each mentioned, having a moment of just like recognizing that you weren't as either anti-racist or woke as some people would say, as you may have wanted to be. I have kind of two questions. One, was there a very specific incident that led to your understanding of that? And two, how do you determine just how woke you really want to be? Some people might say that the spectrum has two extremes and there isn't, a level of being too woke, so to speak. How do you determine, where you want to grow towards?
I would say for me, the defining incident happened in, I believe it was the summer of 2017, when the riots happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. God had sort of orchestrated events in my life where my race mentor from Tampa he and I were having lots of conversations. I'd been introduced to a book called Waking Up White, and I began to sort of see my story with race as Debbie Irvin, the author, explained her story. And then Charlottesville happened. And I came to this awareness that particularly for white people, when they think of racist people, they think of the alt-right protesters in Charlottesville, and they say, that's racist, and I'm not that. And, so I'm reading this book about other kinds of racism with regards to white privilege and those kinds of things. And I'm all of a sudden just sort of grasping, understanding things that I really didn't understand before. And, that to me was when I really began to wake up to it. And, your second part of the question, how woke do I desire to be? I don't think there's a limit to it. For me, it's the heart of God. It's really not a human construct. And so, I want to be all that God desires me and the church to be.
Yeah, I'd like to I'll kind of share a little bit of my navigation through this. It started with me when I was growing up. I had some of my best friends were African-American guys, and we'd spent a lot of time together. In two particular episodes I'll share with you that were very personal, had an impact on me. And I think, first of all, the word woke might be a distraction for some white people. I'm just going to be real. And that, I think maybe you just need to say, let's replace that with word awaken. I think Clark's used that. I think it's a great word. And then that's where we get woke from. Okay. And so the awakening happened for me when I was about 21 years old. Me and my friend Cedric we were at my Christian school in West Palm Beach, Florida, and I lived at home. We hopped in he lived with me and my family, and we got in the car to go back home, and it was later at night, 11:30, and the police started following me rather closely, which I was like, oh, and he kind of got a little tense, and he's like, bro, be careful, be careful. I'm like, what are you talking about? We're fine. He's like, no, you'll be careful. Next thing I know, the lights were on, and I was out of the car, spread on the ground, treated like an animal for no reason. And so my awakening began that very moment, seeing like, okay, I've driven this road 1,000 times, never had a problem. The time I drive with my African-American friend, my brother, it's complete different treatment. And he was laughing at me the whole time while I'm spread out on the ground. I'm like, bro, what's going on? He's like, just go with it, man. Don't worry about it. This is normal. And that was a very, very profound awakening for me, because I never knew that, we were treated so differently. I had no idea that happened until I experienced it. And a second story, a few years later, I was with three of my two African-American friends, another Latino friend, and we were coming from a hip hop concert in Fort Lauderdale, Bill. We were driving north on Interstate 95, had to stop and get gas. It was a little bit later at night, probably 11, not too late. We stopped to get gas, and I noticed, so remember, I had my first awakening. At that point, it triggered me to be, okay, there's some differences here, and I wanted to learn. And I've been immersed in that. A few years in, a similar incident happens where one police officer notices us. Next thing you know, there's 10 cars around us. There's a helicopter flying high, and the bullhorn is on and it's telling us all to get down. And I was freaking out. I had no idea. My friends are like, bro, just go with the flow. Again, another experience where I've done that 1,000 times. I've been at a gas station at 11 o'clock at night and had no problems, but yet this time, because of the people of color that I'm with, it was obvious that was an issue. Again, another moment where I was an awakening. This has been a lifelong process for me of understanding, and something that I want to share, this word reconciliation. And this is where, for me, it's been all about reconciliation. How do we reconcile that? Dr. John Perkins, one of my heroes, and I think everybody here would agree, says that reconciliation is, and I'm going to quote it because I'd mess up, is washing each other's wounds. And I think for me, it has been, how can I wash my brother's wounds through this? How can I understand this? And I think that's what woke is. That's what it's been for me, awakening. I want to reconcile. I'm not content with saying, oh, there's a problem and it doesn't really affect me. And I'm looking into the camera right now, all my white brothers and sisters. This is real. I've lived it out, okay? Proof positive. And I want to know, how can I help wash my brothers and sisters' wounds so that we can reconcile? How can I understand? That's awakening to me.
That's good. No, I think for me, as I look back, I don't know that it was like one aha moment, but it more over a series of, as I shared, kind of like seeing different interpretations of the same events, and then seeing brothers and sisters, African Americans, just such pain, and then like, what am I not getting? And then trying to press into those, and seeing a lot of different events really began a process of discovery for me, and a seeking to build relationships. And then that has helped me to understand a lot more. In terms of how woke do I want to be, I like what Chris said, and I think that we can be I get what we're saying and asking, but that, the idea is, again, just being understanding. I think I look throughout scripture, and you look at several times where people are just not seeing. And then, for example, in the New Testament, God got a hold of Paul and sort of scales fell from his eyes, and he just saw in a fresh way. And I think that for us, it's that idea of, I want to be, I guess I would say this, I want to be fully awakened to the gospel and Jesus' identity inside of me and what that means, and any blind spots. So for me, it's I don't look at race and racial reconciliation as our only responsibility. It's a big responsibility. And yet as Christians, we've got the whole world, that every crack, every dark corner, every place the gospel should shine. So I'd hate for our blind spots, and now particularly in this context of race and reconciliation, to prevent us from seeing problems, seeing pain, and then making excuses, hiding. In other words, I don't want to be asleep to it. I don't want to ignore it. I don't want to pretend and just say, okay, let's wait till this new problem blows over and then pretend everything is okay. Part of when we say reconciled, I think when we look at some of the images we've talked about earlier, like, hey, we all want to be relationally connected just like heaven. Well, in heaven, it's fully in the light. We're in the light of God. And so there's no hidden pockets, and that's living in intimacy. And I think the problem with a lot of people now is we live in relationship or go to church sometimes with people of different ethnicities, but we have things that hold us back and prevent us from levels of intimacy that we could share, because we are shutting out, sometimes unintentionally, sometimes because we don't see it, pain and challenges that other people are experiencing, that the very first step is to be aware and be awakened to. So I don't know if that helps, but I guess to whatever extent the gospel can shine through.
No, that was all really good, and really insightful. One thing I was curious about as you all were speaking was, obviously as a Black person, sometimes navigating, and I've had this conversation with PV a few times, where it just feels like I'm in two pandemics, and I don't know, which officers are safe and which ones aren't. And, it's frightening, even though you don't want to live in a spirit of fear. I don't find myself often on the other side of that, where I'm trying to walk along somebody else who is being othered by me in a certain, like, I try, but I've not been in that situation often. And so I don't know what my overwhelm feels like, but I don't know what your overwhelm feels like, or how you even navigate or balance that as a pastor. Do you have any tips or just practices that you have to just help to preserve your tenacity throughout this ordeal, or throughout this journey? And you can noodle on that while we also think about just some of the mistakes or successes that you've had on your journey as a pastor, and shepherding and ministering to an ever diversifying church. So those were two questions. One was like a hold for later while you think about it question, about just ways that you preserve your spirit and your strength to continue to do the hard work, and to continue to lead the church in that work. And then the other is more about just some of the lessons you've learned from either mistakes or successes as you all pastor churches that are growing in diversity contextually.
Yeah, I'll pipe in on that, Jalith. I think personally, something that has been very important through this time in the pandemics, right, is people around me, is having really good people around me. For example, this morning I have a really good friend, an African-American pastor outside of Philly. And I said, before I hopped in this conversation today, I wanted to talk to a friend and just flush more things out. He's helping me understand Black history better, because I think it's important. I think that's a big part. Is like having good people around you. I think Clark calls it like race mentors. I really like that term. Is some people who are ahead of you, understand it, who have a 360 on things, where I think a lot of us pastors can, we can easily miss things. And I want to have a 360 on that. In regards to the other pandemic, I think, again, it's people, having good people around you. You cannot do this alone. And listen, if you depend on the news outlets to shape and form your thinking, you have serious issues. You know what I'm saying? And so I try to ignore as much news as possible and not let that form my thinking. And I want good people around me to help form thinking, help me like throw ideas off of and flush things out with. And that helps keep me sane. It has been a lifesaver for me, is having good people. Even this is helpful, having conversation, because if you're just receiving information, that's not a good thing.
That's great. I would let me start with one of the mistakes that I think I made when it came to this, and that is for many years just ignoring a lot of these issues and just saying well, I don't feel equipped. I don't know what to say. And so not saying anything. And I think that there was a conviction when we began to say, okay, it's important that I need to begin to speak up to these. I may not feel qualified, I may feel whatever, but there needs to be some kind of voice, prophetic voice speaking into these issues. Because kind of like you said, Chris, if we, as pastors, if we just let the news outlets, left, right, in between, whatever, define the issues, because a lot of times they're crafted into political issues where they're really not. In some ways, we need to detangle some of these issues and have the conversations along gospel lines, which, by the way, means some of us need to let, probably a lot of us need to let our political idolatry in some ways die. And I think that that's an important thing, because sometimes that can stand in the way of us moving forward. But yeah, I made that mistake. And then I began to speak. And it's funny because you know what? You're not going to always get it right. I remember someone spoke to me and they said, most of the time when you talk about race, it's either ignorant or offensive. And so it's learning in those early stages to kind of come along and say, okay, but I don't want to be ignorant or offensive. And so I think it's a process of learning and having race mentors, which is one of the successes, I would say. I just say that to say, like, I think I heard an African-American sharing with another person recently, like, here's pastors. Someone said, what do you need to hear? A white pastor asked him, what do you need to hear from us? He's like, here's what I need to hear. Something. He's like, I don't need you to say it perfect. I need you to say something. And then you can kind of grow into that. And so I think that was the flip side of some of the successes. And I certainly don't think I have it all figured out now. I probably say a lot ignorant now. But again, it's of ignorance. It's maybe because I don't know better, but trying to learn and trying to grow in that process. I'd say another success was when we started our church, we deliberately said we're going to be an apolitical church as a church. We don't do political causes, but as a pastor, some years back, I had to really let a political idolatry in my heart die. And I have political opinions and beliefs and so forth, but I think that real idolatry died that death. And, you want to keep that dead and again, allow the gospel to shape a lot of these issues. But I think for me, those were some of the important things, because again, race issues, other important issues that we should be talking about, sometimes the barricade is our politics.
For me, some of the work that I've had to do is reading broadly, reading those I agree with and those that I don't agree with. I heard somebody say something a long time ago, all truth is God's truth. And so somebody may have an opinion that ultimately I don't agree with, but there may be truth in there that I need to hear, and I need to learn from that. And picking up on what Chris said, I think if you do consume media, you need to consume from all sources so that you're not just getting one politicized view. And truly, we have to remember that the media's goal is to get you to watch because their sponsors pay them to do that. So they have a motive that's really not altruistic. One of the mistakes I made, and it happened in the summer of 2017, while the race issues were happening in Charlottesville, Colin Kaepernick was protesting police brutality by kneeling during the national anthem. And a man who became my race mentor, who has another one of my race mentors, he's a black man. He prefers the term black. And we both happened to show up at the gas station at the same time. We were pumping gas. And I said, well, what do you think about what Colin Kaepernick's doing? He goes, well, I agree with him. And, I'm not going to watch NFL anymore. I go, wow. He goes, well, what do you think? And I'm embarrassed to say that what I said was gobbledygook. It didn't matter. It showed my ignorance on the real issue. It also showed, and I've used this word already, my white privilege. I appreciate what Reverend Julian DeShazer, how he defines white privilege. He says it's the ability to walk away. So I was actually able to walk away from the conversation because I'm white. Now, if you don't like white privilege, if that just messes with you, because some people think white privilege means that you didn't work hard for the things you have in life. That's not what it's about. It's about that your skin tone gives you favor in the eyes of the world. So maybe white favor is better, but I made a mistake that day, and I actually realized it before the week was out, and I wrote him an email and apologized, and he was very gracious to me. He accepted my apology, and you know, he's just been an amazing brother who I would say is long suffering, because he has coached me through some of my missteps and my misspeakings, and he's just been gracious.
You know, I'd like to say something. I didn't mention, you know, some of the failure on my side, and I would say I would echo Bill. You know, ignorance is from ignoring, and when you are familiar with people and you have friends, and you know, I mean, my roommate was black. My whole life, I think it's easy to become integrated in and still be ignorant, because you ignore the very things that are a problem, or you know, are problematic. Like you're talking, you know, Clark, about white privilege, and I like you said, you know, white favor, or I heard Dr. Perkins call it white advantage, and it's like we do. And it's just, I mean, and if anybody's watching right now, you're listening, you're like, I don't believe in that, like you're just ignoring it. And I think for me, it's like you can easily ignore it, because the truth is there's a lot of success in the world, everybody from different pathways. I mean, America, I'm still blown away that by this nation. I've traveled the world and I've seen, like it's actually kind of wonky with all the integration. This is the most integrated nation in the world. Like it's so wonky, and there's a lot of things that aren't right. There's some things that are working. There's a lot of successes, and I think we can see some of the successes from people of color, and we can still, and what we do is we ignore the white advantage that still exists, and it's just there. I mean, it's a reality. And I think for me, is ignoring that. And I think right now in this season, you know, it was Ahmaud Arbery really wrecked me. I mean, and the George Floyd episode was awful, but the Ahmaud Arbery thing wrecked me, because I look at Ahmaud Arbery, and that could be anybody's kid going for a run in a neighborhood, and it was just another neighbor killing another neighbor, and that wrecked me, and that actually caused me to say, okay, I can't ignore some of this stuff anymore. I think we coast, and I think it's seasons too. We coast as a nation, as we coast as Christians, and that Ahmaud Arbery wrecked me, still does. And I'm not saying it's worse than George Floyd. I'm just saying that pierced my soul deeper than the George Floyd episode, just because they're neighbors. It wasn't the police brutality. It's this neighbor killing a neighbor, and it was, yeah. Anyway, a little rambling there, but I think that whole idea of, for me, I ignored, like Bill mentioned. That was a thing, and this season has been an awakening for me.
I think just bringing in your other question that you asked us to think about, and you talked about how do you remain energized or kind of keep continuing in there. One of the things that I learned from Dr. Anderson, I remember when I went out to Maryland and spent some time with him, and he came out here and spent some time with us in our church. One of the things he really imparted to me was, when you're talking about ideas of racial reconciliation, redemption, inclusivity, that his ministry, he's an African-American pastor with a multi-ethnic church, a large mega church in Maryland. And one of the things that he said is you just have to kind of think of talking about all these things as tension, release, tension, release. So on the one hand, you don't want to ignore and just never discuss. On the other hand, it can't be all you talk about too, because there's a whole myriad of things. And he said, you'll wear people out, you'll frustrate people, and you can't just be all the time ratcheting. But I think in terms of that helps me when you ask sort of the sustainability question I think that's what it is. And that's why when we talked about doing this online series, we said, let's not just do a few weeks in a row and then be done real quick intensity. Let's look over the long haul, how we continue conversations going until one day maybe you say, hey, guess what, Bill, the world's fixed. We don't need to do that anymore. And wouldn't that be a great thing? But I think for me, that's one of the lessons I learned is don't let it go forever and don't go on forever. Like you have to keep it as part of the ongoing gospel message applied to all areas of life.
Awesome. That's really helpful and insightful. Thank you for bringing that back up, because I was like onto my onto my next question. But no, I do think it's important, especially as pastors. Y'all are people who, you have a really tough job, right? Like, there are things about people you're not related to that just keep you up at night, from whether it be from, different counseling sessions or prayer requests that you're receiving, or just feedback that you're getting about maybe a new initiative, or, your sermon every week. Like, I'm an introvert. I'm not a public speaker, so I could not. But I'm sure that, the cross is heavy. And so just to take on, such an emotionally charged effort within your own churches is also a great deal of work, but it's so appreciated. And that kind of brings me into my next question and curiosity is just, how important is it to you? Obviously, you're not trying to do this in vain, but how important is it to you for your churches to embrace your efforts to just cultivate diversity within your own churches? Like, how important is that to your effectiveness?
I recognize that we're all in different places in our walk with Christ, and I can get impatient and want people to be where I am, and I know that is not right. But what I've been able to do during actually before George Floyd's murder, before Ahmaud Arbery's murder, before Breonna Taylor's murder, my race mentor challenged me to read Latasha Morrison's "Be the Bridge," and she has created a racial reconciliation movement by God's plan in her life, and started Be the Bridge racial reconciliation groups. And so we started one, and in the midst of that group, we were able to get a mixed group of people, white folks and black folks and even Latino folks, and we walked through this book, and that was powerful. It was life-giving. It was encouraging, because I do recognize that I minister to people who say there's no issue with Black and white America, and they think that the protests are overblown, and then there are people who are very sensitive to it. So it is challenging to minister across that spectrum, and it's frustrating that it's become so politicized in our nation, because I preached a series basically that racism is a sin, and to me that's weird. It's not a political issue. We can politicize it, but it's not. And so it is frustrating for me at times, because I believe that God created the church to take the message of Christ to the world. And so ultimately the church is the hope of the world. And so when the church isn't doing what it can to bring that hope to all people, that is frustrating to me. And so it's important, so important to me. And it's a challenge in all levels, but particularly during this season, it's been very challenging.
I think for me, obviously when you sense God is leading you on a journey to navigate people through, you want there to be broad support. You hope that people are bought in, and that can both confirm what God is doing and help advance the mission and the cause of whatever it is he's doing. And yes, it can be particularly challenging. Like Clark said, though, we are at different stages in different places. I guess for me, what I hope that people will see is that because I have had, and I've mentioned before, some people say, well, why don't you just stick to the gospel? And we you know, we don't have any problems at our church. And it's like, I guess for me, what I hope people will see is that if we can speak into these things, this is the gospel, and that there's a whole group of people outside the church and inside the church that can experience it in a more fuller way, including us. And I guess, you know, I finding my own frustrations is even in my own process as a work in process, trying to understand and reconcile thoughts and certain things, accept certain ideas and reject certain ideas, because not everything that comes in the package of race and reconciliation is good and gospel. There's a lot of, like, we always have to have our filtered eyes on as we're processing things, but not just because you see something that may not be right doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater or disregard those things. So you need to move forward. But I guess it is important in the sense that the gospel should be important to us. The message of Jesus should be important to us. We see that Jesus broke down all different kinds of lines of distinction, including class, ethnicity, gender, so that we could be at level foot at the cross. And yeah, for me, for all people, I guess it'd be important for our church to know that I'd love for you to be involved in this process, and we don't all have to be at the same stage. We don't have to agree about everything, by the way. We could still disagree politically. We could still disagree and not see everything the same, but there should be enough in common to where we can really move forward and make a difference in our world.
Well, you know, it's so important to me. It goes back to where God has called us up here in Vermont. It's a very, it's very much not diverse at all population. It's the whitest state in America, which is ironic that I have a passion for racial reconciliation. And I feel like through this season, you know, I'm teaching our church the importance of this, even though we're white. And what I've learned is that that's actually important, because part of the problem, again, is ignoring. If you don't talk about something and it's still a part of their lives, they hear about, they know about, it's a reality. So I've taken it upon just leading the way in our teaching our church, having conversations. One of my best friends, he told me, he said, Chris, you know, one of the best things that you guys can do, and he's speaking from another, you know, location, he's not in Vermont, but he said, one of the best things you can do is, he said, is find people who are of color in your community and talk to them and just let them know, because they probably feel very inferior there. I never thought of that. You know, you never thought of that. So that's something that I'm trying to incorporate into my life, into my little hub here. But I think God, through this too, has given me, because of the passion I have for racial reconciliation, the idea that heaven is, I mean, dude, it's going to be the most diverse place ever, right? Like, white people are going to be in, like, it's just going to be this crazy, diverse, eternal destination. And I was like, well, I have a passion for that. And God has given me some, you know, regional influence. And I'm like, if I can help, you know, lend a little bit of help to the reconciliation conversation, I'm in, you know. And so that's what I'm navigating through. It's weird. I'll be honest, Jalith, it's weird living in a very homogenized white world. It's difficult, but you got to find your places. And I think our church has rallied on that too. We understand the importance of this.
Thank you. You know, one of the things I guess that makes me think about is just kind of what's at risk if the church doesn't embrace pastors' efforts to lead them into, you know, the diversity of heaven, right? You know, when we look back in history, the church kind of missed it a little bit, right? So, you know, I guess I'll just say this for everybody else, because I feel like I've talked to each of you individually to share this at some point or another. But just one of the reasons I even participate in our Race and Redemption series every episode is because there's so much at risk if we miss the mark again, right? As the global church, people leaving the church, people, finding community and then kind of not finding it, and kind of, running away from the discomfort in one of the most sacred places that they could be, right? And the place where they should feel the safest and the most embraced in comparison to the world, right? Even though we know that we're not perfect as Christians, we're not perfect, and that's kind of the whole thing, is like we need Jesus to like help us to be perfect enough, right? We need the Holy Spirit to help us to even commune, right? And so I think that's kind of one of my passions. Since I had to chime in, I couldn't just sit and not say anything.
We're glad you said something.
Oh, thanks so much. But this is actually one of the questions I've been kind of very curious to ask you guys, because I don't think that you get asked this often, or at least not in a place where other people would be able to hear the answer. But what do you want Black people specifically in your churches to know? Whether it's about your church or about your heart, or even marginalized people in other ways, what do you want them to know?
What I want the people of color in my church to know, and marginalized people to know, is that we're in this together, that I love them and I care for them. And, one of my associate pastors said to me afterwards, after George Floyd's murder, said, we should call and check in with our families of color. And I should have thought of that, but I didn't. But I did. I made those phone calls, and I was taken back by my emotions. I started crying with the first phone call, and I didn't expect it. I didn't know why, except that this was so real and so tender for them and for me. And then I remember having a conversation with a dad who's got a son, and he's had to have conversations with his son about what to do if the police pull him over. I didn't have to have that conversation with my kids. So I want my congregation, I want brothers and sisters in Christ to know that we're there for them. And I'm going to jump on the other side of that, Jalith, and say, I want my white brothers and sisters to understand that you're making assumptions about people of color that aren't accurate. So you really do need to pursue relationships with them, as I've been through multiple relationships and racial reconciliation groups. The continual aha is that the stereotypes that we've grown up with about different cultures and different people is not accurate. And the only way we can diffuse that is by being in relationship with one another. And that teaches me so much, and it never fails to surprise me when I experience it or see other people experience it.
Good. I would say I would say the same words. I care, that you matter, and that something that's been, I guess I could say, a part of my enlightenment awakening has been understanding the evangelical Christian church and the history of not being there. And that's created the divide in the Big C church between the black and white church. You've heard it, we've all heard it said, the most divided place, segregated place in America is Sunday mornings. And there's truth to that, because in the 50s and 60s, our evangelical white church leaders ignored the Dr. Perkins of the world and weren't there with them when it came to civil rights. And I would say, you matter. And if Breonna Taylor matters to you, matters to me. If Ahmaud Arbery matters to you, it matters to me. If George Floyd matters to you, it matters to me. You feel it matters because people matter to God. And I would want them to know that. And I think sometimes we can get the news, all the news and we talked about this earlier, that can captivate us and we think it's political. Breonna Taylor is not political. Ahmaud Arbery is not political. George Floyd is not political. The systemic racism in our nation, that's not political, that's reality. And it matters. And like Bill said, that's part of the gospel narrative, right? The gospel rejects racism and accepts all people. And you matter and I care are the words that I think are most important.
And I agree. I think what I would want people of color, African Americans, all people to know at Calvary is, just like you guys have said, you matter. Just like every person that steps in the door, you're treasured. You're not tolerated. You're welcome. You're my brother. You're my sister. And you're valued. And I would also, I guess a word that I'd want to say is thank you. Because I understand, and there's a movement in the past few years where a lot of people of color are kind of stepping back from either multi-ethnic or predominantly white churches, and kind of because they feel comfortable going to churches where it's more their own ethnicity, where there's less paper cuts, there's less where they could just kind of feel free to be themselves. And again, you and I, Jalith, have talked about understanding the impulse, but it breaks my heart that that's what some have to do or feel that they have to do in order to feel safe or to feel comfortable. And I want all people, I want white people too, to feel safe and comfortable in our churches. Like I want that for every single person that walks in the door. And so thank you, because you've put up with some things and you've stuck in even when it might have been easier to step out, even in seasons of ignorance, even in seasons of silence, even in seasons of maybe comments that might have missed the mark or whatever the case, you've stuck in there. And so I thank you for that. And I appreciate that grace and the fortitude and the trust in God, but also the trust you've placed in me and other leaders. And I pray that it will all be worth it in the season ahead, rather than just, okay, we all break up and kind of go to our own groups and then we'll figure it out when we get to heaven. No, I think like earth should be practiced for heaven in some ways. So I think this is a great thing. So yeah, I care. I love you and thank you.
I think there's one other thing that we sort of tiptoed around there because we talked about, we want our black and brown friends to know their lives matter. There's a huge misunderstanding, particularly in white evangelical church, about the phrase Black Lives Matters. They associate it with a political action group. But my experience is, as I talk to white Christians and to black Christians and Latino Christians, most of them that have black and brown friends say that phrase because their black friends' lives matter to them, not because they support a political action group that has co-opted that phrase. And so the best thing that, our people of color and our friends of color can hear is that their lives matter. And it's not an exclusion to some other lives, but it's at this instance when they're hurting, they need to know that we believe their lives matter.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm trying not to get emotional just hearing that, because as all of you know, and I think I've said this on the Race and Redemption series too, these kinds of conversations are a lot of like heavy lifting for me personally. Not because they're not, you know, worthwhile or anything, just that they take a lot of like emotional strength. I'm like sipping my coffee, trying to, you know, keep up with you guys. But I just wanted to share that I really appreciate all of your words and your insights, and just like your openness to share your hearts and to be vulnerable with us. I know that, you know, that is at a risk. This is not, you know, free for anybody, right? You risk a lot of, you know, backlash. We risk backlash having this episode with 3 white pastors, right? But, you know, you risk backlash too in like a personal attack kind of way. And so I just wanted to let you know that I know that and appreciate you taking that risk. But I did want to open the floor if there was anything that you just felt led to share to either side of the court, I guess, of public opinion. Yeah.
You know, there's something I would like to share. I think there's a lot of white people that don't know what to say. I think that's a reality. They don't know what to say because maybe they don't have, you know, a history of friends and connectivity to a culture. And so just don't know what to say. And I would say to them after my conversations, and Julie, you probably affirm this, is like, sometimes you just say, I don't know what to say, but I do care. And I think those words right there, my white friends, whoever's watching right now, it's okay to let people, like, you know, maybe you work with someone who's Black, maybe you go to church with someone. It's okay to say, I don't know what to say, but I know I care. And I think that might be a very powerful thing that Christians, if we could just engage even in those conversations, because if you just don't say anything, it goes back to that singular word, ignore. And when you ignore, you become ignorant, and ignorance is always divisive, especially in this conversation. I think we've gone too long as the church ignoring and pleading ignorance. And I think we just have to be willing to say, I don't know what to say. Matter of fact, I don't have any Black friends. And if that's okay, but acknowledging, like, I don't know what to say, but I care. And I think that could be the beginning of some reconciliation in some workplaces, reconciliation in your neighborhoods, in particular us in our churches. But white people have to speak up, even if it's those words.
That's great, Chris. You know, we do need to speak up for racial justice and racial reconciliation. At the same time, white people need to listen when they get the opportunity to talk to their Black friends, their brown friends, and not deflect, not argue about, well, what about this or what about that? Just listen. You're not going to learn anything if you continue to deflect. You really have to listen and care and love. And you know, I've challenged my congregation to make friends with across the racial divide, and I know that can feel awkward, like a project. So if you don't know somebody and you don't want to make somebody feel like a project, then read across racial lines and learn what it's like. You know, one of the most profound things that I learned when I was reading Waking Up White by Debbie Irving was people of color every day think about being a person of color. And as a white person, I don't think about my race. I don't think about the challenges of being white because there's really not many challenges, and I don't live in that world. And so we need to just recognize that there's a lot that we don't know and understand, and we have a lot to learn. And to me, Christians have to be those leaders and learners in that area.
That's great. And the last bit I would say would build on something you said. There's nothing that replaces building relationships with someone different, but that takes time. Like, you don't want to just say, hey, as you can see, I'm white, you're black, will you be my friend? Like, don't do that. Like Jalith said, don't do the mission, or what is it? Racial, what did you rephrase for dating? Oh gosh. Anyway, whatever. Don't be weird. Just like, hey, will you be my black friend? Like, it takes time. It takes investment. It takes development. But you might say, but I still want to learn. Well, I want to take what Clark said. If you don't have that in place now, start building it. But you can read right now. And one of the things you said is Across the Divide. What a great transition to the book I want to recommend and leave you guys with is to David Anderson. I mentioned a bunch of times, came to our church. He wrote Gracism, but a book before that, he wrote a book called Letters Across the Divide. And it's him and his white friend, and they come from different political spectrums, and it's raw, real letters that they wrote back and forth, exploring all kinds of issues. So the kind of conversations you'd probably want to have, maybe with a black person, say, I want to have this conversation with a white person, or vice versa. It's a great book to read, Letters Across the Divide. They get into some serious issues and stuff. So I'd recommend that. Could be a real great place for a lot of people to start.
Yeah, let me echo that. Like, reading is so, like, we have such a unbelievable resource right now with the books that are out. There's so many good books, and one that probably has had the most profound impact on my lens of reconciliation is Let Justice Roll Down by Dr. John Perkins. Another book that I've read recently that I think is really easy read, palatable, is Miles McPherson is The Third Option. Fantastic book on, and I love he's just, the way he writes is super low lying fruit, and I would recommend reading. Man, we have such a good gift up there of a lot of these great books. And Tony Evans, last but not least, a great book. It's called Oneness Embraced. And Dr. Evans, probably, in my opinion, is like he's the grandfather of evangelical Christianity, and we need to listen to him because this book is so good, and it helps explain the racial and political divide that has happened and where it came from. And it was so helpful for me to be able to, now when I'm in conversations, I'm like, actually, you might be in this space and I might be in this space, or I'm over here, you're over here, but actually we're more alike than we are different. It's just we've allowed maybe these political parties usurp some ideas, and the truth is we're more alike than we're different. So anyway, so I agree. Books, man, read.
Yeah, books are great. I for Christian leaders, I would encourage you to read Woke Church by Dr. Eric Mason. It's really good. Dr. Perkins' book, One Blood, and that's excellent. I've mentioned a couple other books, but also, to really understand the Black experience, read some of Ta-Nehisi Coates' books. He's a very prolific writer, and he really helps white people understand the Black experience.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for that. Actually, we do have a website for Race for Redemption, so maybe we can get just some links to those books on that website. Make it really easy for everybody to access it. But at the very least, we'll put them in the comments while you watch them. Again, I can't thank you all enough just for taking time out of your busy schedules to participate in this episode of Grace and Redemption. It is our tradition to leave with a final word of hope and redemption for our viewers. So I will let whoever wants to take the lead on that go forward.
Well, I feel like my thought was read that book that I recommended, and I'd encourage you to take that as a next step. But I guess kind of pulling it back together is, first of all, thank you, Jalith, for stepping into the uncomfortable and having this conversation. And I guess that's maybe a thought for everyone I'd wrap up today is don't let discomfort keep you away. God wants to do a good thing, and his work has never been comfortable. And you look at his men and women and people throughout the Bible have always stepped into uncomfortable situations before a group of adverse people, before judges and kings and rulers, and it had to be extremely uncomfortable. So let's not miss our moment. I think we were born for such a time as this, and all the difficulties, we can get frustrated, we can yell, we can complain, or we can say, okay, God, what are you doing? And be a part of it. And that's what I want to do. And I hope you'll not miss that too.
I guess my hopefulness and redemption would be just the fact that we have people in leadership, pastors who are just taking the hard work and trying to get it done. I've said it before, but I know that it's not easy to do this work in your roles, but it's so necessary. And so that's one thing. The second thing would be um, that we do have history to learn from, both world history and, you know, Jesus history, right? In the Bible, which is also history. But I know people, they don't always think of it as the same thing, but it is. And so there are people who have modeled the ways that we should respond for us, that we can look to. And so Jesus being like this. So I think that that would be just my little nugget, is to look to the one who has done all of the things, right? Knowing that even though we're not perfect, we can do our best. And that's what we should strive towards. You're not going to get it 100% right. I don't get it 100% right. I probably messed something up in this conversation, which is totally fine. I'll do better next time by the grace of God. And so that's something that I would do.
Jesus gave us the great commandment to love God with all our heart. And he said the second one is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. Your black neighbor, your brown neighbor, your white neighbor, your Latino neighbor. That's the heart of the gospel. We can't avoid it as followers of Jesus. If Christians get that right, we truly would change the world.
And I'll say, I believe God has given us an amazing gift of the times we live in. I think we can easily panic at all the things going on. We can get caught up with all the distractions, the waves, or we can look to Jesus, know that he's got a plan, that he's come. Guys, I believe Jesus is coming back for us soon. And I believe this is the great opportunity for the church to rise up as a united church and get engaged in the rescue mission, loving people who are hurting, broken. And I think a part of this, I think God has given us a gift right now, the church, to be unified. And it's just going to require us to, what we talked about through this whole conversation, is to be honest, to talk about it, to learn, to grow, to listen, to read. And I believe we're a better church together. Black, white, Latino, you fill in the blank. We are better together. We are not better apart.
Thanks. That will be it. We're wrapping up our first episode of the series. We hope that you were able to learn a lot just from observing our conversation. And hopefully you've made some comments. If you had any questions or wanted to add to the conversation, you can just type in the comments. We're there. I know I'll be there moderating. So if you have any other questions or feedback, please feel free to share. And share this video. Yes, share this video. We would like to reach as many people as possible. And so if you just take 2 seconds to share this on your page, even if you just say, oh yeah, like these people I know are talking about something random, you should watch it. That's good enough for us. We just want as many people as possible to be able to join in on the conversation. So like, comment, and share, and we can see this.